if the Fancy Food Show happens at the end of June, like it typically does, then you might be here. If Expo West is big for you end of March, and you might be coming right back. We're hearing, I participate in a lot of association world kind of events, and the thinking is that attendees of all sorts, of all industries, are going to expect a virtual component of all trade shows now. Particularly with food, that's tough because you want to be able to, you need to have your senses to really be able to tell how the food is. So I think it'll be a little bit tougher in this realm than in others. But I do see that. And, we'll keep our fingers crossed on some of the good vaccine news we've heard over the last couple of days, because if indeed that does happen relatively soon, then I could see us by May and June being able to go ahead and let's see, it's Anuga next year, right, in October. So I know I'm looking forward to that. So I really would love to be back. I think we will by that point, if these vaccines pan out.
Well, thank you, Bob. That was great. That was a lot of information. We know you're a great resource. AFI has always been a great partner for global entities trying to get connected into the U.S., and we really appreciate all your leadership as well. So as we have talked about food, and now the intricacies get a little more complicated when we start to talk about beverage. The president of the National Association of Beverage Importers, Robert Tobiasen, is with us today. Thank you for being here, and we'd like to hear now from your perspective a little bit again about what the organization does. We know there's some phenomenal wines that come out of Lebanon, along with some other spirits, and you're the man in D.C. that knows the whole beverage piece, which is really complicated beyond not just the national level, but it's regional and state and county in some instances, so the complexity is incredible. Kick us off, Robin. Tell us about the organization and then the resources, so we can get into some questions.
Thank you, Phil, for that kind introduction, and thank you, Excellency, for the invitation, for the privilege of participating in this wonderful event. NABI has been around since 1935. It has evolved as the alcohol industry has evolved over the years. We basically serve as the eyes, ears, and voice of alcohol beverage importers in the United States. As Phil has pointed out, alcohol it's a subset of food. So all of the requirements that Bob Bauer or James Kramer's talked about immediately apply, because distilled spirits, wine, beer are a food. But you have another level of requirements that also come into play. And as Mr. Kramer said, they can be daunting, because as you point out, there are federal requirements, state requirements, and in some cases, even local city or county requirements. And our role at NABI principally deals with the federal requirements, but we do interact on the state requirements as well.
Do you think that as companies are thinking about just getting an order and coming into the marketplace, where in the sequence of some of this should they be prepared to really understand what's taking place? In other words, do they again need to have a third party before they start getting into the distribution network? What would your advice be to young startup taking first steps?
But in all these cases, you really need to know the regulatory requirements, and because in those discussions with the importers, areas you may want to deal with in your contract, as Bob mentioned, you just can present your case stronger if you demonstrate that you understand the regulatory environment. I'll go into some of those requirements in a moment, but I did want to echo some of the comments that in your dialogue with Bob on containers, for example. I've had members shortages There are still canceled sailings or blank sailings. So a lot of times shipments have to change the last minute and come in at a spot price, which is much higher than its scheduled price. COVID-19 adds additional dynamics because now containers have to be desanitized after they're emptied before they're refilled. And there are debates between sellers, importers, purchasers as to who's going to bear the cost of that, because nobody's contract currently covers them. Social distancing issues at the ports mean that truck deliveries to load exports are now taking 6 hours where they used to take 3 hours, because you have to limit the interaction.
To be feet on the ground here in the U.S., and they definitely need to have somebody that understands the marketplace. From your perspective and your members' perspective, who should they reach out to help them identify? And what are some of the things that you would suggest they do in developing criteria to find that local point of entry that's going to help them? Whether it's a distributor or possibly a broker or a sales agent of some sort. Should they start that way? Should they pick a county? How would you advise them, knowing the complexities here, Robert?
There's no one size fits all situation here. Many of the importers, other than the large global companies like Diageo or Noah Card, Moet Hennessy, USA. But if you're dealing with importers who bring in products which are not all from the same, with wine, spirits, these are very relational situations. Because I have members who, for generations have dealt with the same foreign producers in Italy, in France, in Spain, in Argentina. It really is relationships. So there's no one way to get in. What I generally recommend to people, because it's a fairly inexpensive way of marketing yourself, is really build up a social media presence. You want to create a pull for your product in the United States. You want to create a name where the retailer goes to his or her wholesaler and says, hey, can you get me some of this? I've heard about this wine. I've heard about this spirit from Lebanon. Can you, what can you tell me about it? And you want that distributor then to go to his import and say, well, what can you tell me about it? Some of my customers are asking about this. You want to create, you really would love to go viral, but you really want to create a pull for your product in the U.S. Now, that pull can be made many different facets of ways. I know you can make it by quality. You can have social media about your excellent, outstanding production processes, your very unique varietals. There are many ways to approach that from a quality point of view. Or what I really want to get at is you have to tell a story, and you have to be very authentic in that story, because people on social media are going to check out your story. And if you have made any fibs or lies in your story, the misrepresentations, you are dead on a right saying, hey, I want to know about this product. I want this product. The last thing I want to mention is quantity of production becomes important. An importer, a distributor wants to know that there will be a sufficient volume available, that if this brand of spirits or this brand of wine becomes the next Josh winery or the next huge demand, that they'll be able to get a steady volume. Because the last thing anybody wants to do, and we do face it with some bourbons, whiskeys, and things now, the production is limited, and people have to tell their customers, well, I can't get it anymore. So really, a solid importer is going to ask you about supply chain, sustainability.
questions about labeling and registration of goods, whether it's the FDA, the USDA.
And FDA has become very important in that, but by no means the only agency involved. But with FDA, not only do you have the pre-registration facility requirement, you have to get advance notice of shipments coming into the United States. That you have to give that notice of arrival date no later than 5 days before, no sooner than 5 days before, no later than 3 days before arrival into the port of entry. You have to make sure that the ingredients in the product, what we call GRAS, generally considered, generally recognized as safe. There are various procedures to do that. In Treasury, which is my background. I had 34 years with Treasury before moving into some consulting, finally, this position. But in the ATF, it was, and then in 2003 it became TTB. The main thing you have to worry about is getting a certificate of label approval for your product. On both FDA's website and TTB's website, there are details about how to do this, but you do need to get a certificate of label approval. Technically, the importer gets that. The person gets it on your behalf. Yeah, but it really is, they are, if it's, say if it's a liqueur or a blended product, a flavored spirit of flavored malt beverage, you need a formula approval. That you submit to TTB before you get to cola. There's one last requirement that becomes important in the case of Lebanon. Since about 2005, and this is a result of trade agreements that the U.S. negotiated. It principally arose out of trade negotiations with Europe, with the EU, but it affects everybody. For wine to be imported into the United States, natural wine, there means varietal names and the like. You have to produce those wines in accordance with U.S. winemaking practices. We call them cellar treatments. Unless you